Yes, Mr. Kinnear.
Afternoon, sir. May I call Gregory Lawson?
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Lawson, I'm going to have to ask you to speak up a bit, otherwise we can't hear what you're doing.
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly.
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
Declare and affirm.
declare and affirm
That the evidence I shall give.
that the evidence I shall give
Shall be the truth.
shall be the truth,
The whole truth.
the whole truth,
And nothing but the
and
truth.
nothing but the truth.
Good. Thank you very much. Sit down and make yourself comfortable. Yes, Mr. Kinnear.
Thanks, sir. First of all, would you mind confirming your name for the record?
Yes, Gregory Lawson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Lawson. Thank you very much for attending today to give evidence. In the blue folder in front of you, if you turn to the first tab, behind that should be your statement dated the 7th of December 2017. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And if you go to the next tab, you should find your contemporaneous notes. Is that right?
That is that, yes.
And if you turn to the final tab, you should find 3 exhibits which were attached to the back of your witness statement, which are various plans.
Yeah, that's correct.
Have you read those documents recently?
I have, yes.
And you confirm their contents are true?
I do.
And you're content for those documents to stand as your evidence to the inquiry?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Lawson, as you've heard me say to others, if at any stage you want a break, please shout. If any of my questions are unclear, please say so and I'll rephrase them.
Okay.
Now, just so you know, the focus of my questions today will be on the FSG mission you were tasked to complete in relation to the 18th floor.
Yep.
Now, before we get on to that, could I ask you some basic questions, just so we get some context? First of all, at the time of the fire, is it right that you've been a firefighter for 20 years?
Just over, yes.
And you were-
sorry, just short of.
And you were based at Willesden on the Red Watch?
That's correct.
And that you were the driver of the appliance Golf 281?
Yep, that's right.
And firefighter Katie Foster was your BA partner on the FSG task to floor 18?
That's correct, yes.
And the other members of your crew were crew manager Cardy,
Watch manager.
watch
Cardi.
manager, to repeat the offence I made earlier on, watch manager Cardy and firefighter Tom Welsh,
Yep,
and crew manager Eden.
that's correct.
Now, as to timings, the LFB provided records which indicate that you mobilised at 01:26, were mobile at 01:28, and you'd arrived at the scene at 01:40. Does that sound about right to
That
you?
sounds about right to me, yes.
Now, in relation to SDBA wear, again, the LFB has provided us with records as to timings, and they indicate that the SDBA was disconnected from your appliance at 01:42, switched on at 01:52, and you tallied out at the bridgehead at 01:53. Do those times sound about right to you?
Sorry, can you say the second one again?
Yes, of course. The SDBA was switched on at 01:52.
Okay, yep.
Now, the first matter I'd like to talk to you about is your time at entry control. Now, on arrival at the bridgehead, did you enter the tower with Foster, Cardy and Welsh?
I wasn't aware who was behind me. I know that we all went back to the truck to get our BA sets on arrival and pick up hose and braking in gear and made our way back to the tower. I walked in with Kate, and I'm sure that Tom and crew manager Eden were behind me.
Okay. Now, if I could ask you to turn to page 2 of your witness statement and the third substantive paragraph there, line 2. You say, we went up to the bridgehead on the 3rd floor where we were briefed and told to go to the 18th floor. FSG calls were in place on that floor. Protocol-wise, at the bridgehead, things were not working as you would expect them to do normally. There were an awful lot of people standing around. There were dozens of crews waiting to go up the building. You say protocol-wise, things were not working as normal. Can you explain your reasoning
Yeah, so for us, the bridgehead and BA entry control is quite a formal and ordered procession for firefighters. There seemed to be quite a lot of people talking around us, a lot of people waiting to go into the building, and it seemed to be quite sporadic how people were pulled forward.
Did you have any sense of any priorities that had been identified?
No, we were aware that people were making FSG calls from inside the building. We weren't sure entirely how many or where they're placed. And the briefings basically were, as it says there, to go to the 18th floor. That was pretty much our briefing.
Now, in respect of that instruction, can you remember who gave you the instruction?
I think, as far as I'm aware, I can remember, I don't know if he gave the instruction or not, but at the bridgehead at the time was Station Officer O'Keefe.
And it appears from what you say in your statement, the detail you were given was to go to the 18th floor, FSG calls were in place. Was that it?
That's pretty much it, yes.
So no detail about conditions in the stairwell?
No conditions about a number of casualties, conditions, or anything else other than the 18th floor.
Okay. And just for the avoidance of doubt, no detail regarding number of adults, number of children,
no.
Or disabilities, vulnerabilities?
No, nothing like that at all.
Okay. Now, by using the phrase FSG, do you understand that to mean to try and search and rescue?
Fire survival guidance is the phone call in place. The directive for that is the control staff have the guidance to maintain, keep them safe inside their house until we can reach them and make a decision.
And looking at the instruction you were given, was the level of detail sufficient for your purposes?
It got us to where we needed to go. We knew we had to get to. It didn't prepare us for what we found on the 18th floor.
Did you ask Watch Manager O'Keefe whether there was any other detail he had for you?
There really wasn't time for that. There was, as we were getting called through, so other crews, and there was just a lot of information being passed, a lot of people at exactly the same time.
Now, staying on page 2 of your witness statement, the third substantive paragraph, 3 lines from the bottom, you say this: we were initially a little bit worried about the 18th floor remit, considering we were standing next to people with EDBA on. We only had standard duration. Now, you say there initially. This suggests that later on you were unworried about not having EDBA.
No, it means that when you have the opportunity to think about something, it can cause you to have doubts. But once you're in action, the doubts tend to subside away and you just carry on instinct, really.
Did you think whether to suggest to Watch Manager O'Keefe that, given that it was the 18th floor, it might have been more appropriate for an EDBA deployment?
I wouldn't have questioned it. Normally, if I think I had more time and it wasn't as severe a situation, I might have done. At that time there, it is about getting in and doing what we could.
One point which has been raised is whether it would have been better, i.e. it would have enabled you to effect more rescues, had you gone up in crews of 4. What would be your view on that?
You're talking purely in hindsight. In the situation I found myself in, more firefighters were what I needed, yes.
And can you explain to us what the advantages would have been, so we understand more fully?
So in the situation we found ourselves in, say myself and Kate, we were faced with 9 casualties on the 18th floor with an irrespirable atmosphere and a long way to go. We tried our best to try and secure other BA crews to help us and assist us in our task. It would have been that we were unable as 2 people to rescue 9. It's beyond us humanly. We needed more people, so more people on hands would have given us more opportunity to rescue more people.
One question which we asked earlier on today was whether a firefighter would ever automatically carry a second BA set with him, and the answer was only in the event of a firefighter having gone missing. I think Crew Manager Gallagher gave that evidence. Does that match your understanding?
Yeah, the BA second set is for assistance and rescue of firefighters, yes.
On the night as you were deployed and told you were to go up to the 18th floor, did it cross your mind that it might have been useful to have a second set of BA to take up with you?
I think it might. Historically, I've never used one myself, but I think that you tend to have a situation where you try and make decisions that are sort of beyond you as a human, to who to give air to, who do you deny air from. Also, I was carrying hose and branches to the 18th floor. Just didn't have enough limbs to carry more stuff.
Okay. And that's the principal disadvantage. You can only carry so much stuff.
Absolutely right,
fair?
yeah.
Okay. Now, next turn to your ascent up the tower, and you tallied out, as we've discussed, it's 0153. And it's right that you and Firefighter Foster decided not to put your masks on for the
That's correct.
initial floors. Can you remember how many floors you went up where you weren't under air, as it were?
It wasn't very far. I think we made it maybe 2 or 3 flights of stairs before the atmosphere became restful for us. At that point, we donned our BA masks.
In your statement, you describe how the stairs were busy and there were screaming from lots of voices. Were you able to identify whether the noise voices were firefighters shouting out to residents, or the voices were coming from residents, or both?
It's a mixture of both. You could hear the voices of firefighters, which is muffled through their BA masks. You could hear people who were obviously not wearing BA masks.
And how long did it take you to get from the bridgehead to the 18th floor?
I have no idea. The reality is we had complete sensory deprivation from the moment we put our masks on. You can hear muffled noises. We had no visibility. We sort of got upstairs by feeling up the banisters. It could have been 5 minutes, it could have been 10 minutes. I really don't know.
Can you remember whether the lighting in the stairwell was working as you went
The
up?
lighting was on, but it had no effect on the staircase.
Can you remember, was it illuminated from the bridgehead all the way up to the 18th floor? Can you remember?
I can't. The smoke was so dense for us going up the staircase until we went to each landing and approached the landing walls. We couldn't see the lights at all.
Okay. Radio comms as you went up. As you went up, what was your experience of radio?
Radio comms was very busy at the bridgehead from probably the moment we put our mask on to the moment we left that building again. It was untenable, couldn't use it.
Okay. Did you have a Barry set?
I had a Barry set and a handheld radio, yes.
Yeah. We've heard some evidence from some firefighters that they carry mobile phones on them and use them during the course of incidents. Did you have your mobile with you?
No.
In your experience, have firefighters used mobiles where radio comms have not worked?
I would say no, because it is against policy in London Fire Brigade to carry mobile phones.
Given the conditions you'd encountered on the way up, did this suggest to you that people needed to be evacuated immediately once you got to them on the 18th floor?
No, I don't make a predisposed decision on the way up there. I take things as I find them when I find them.
As you're going up...
I'm sorry, Mr. Lawson, would you like to sit a little bit further away from the microphone? I think the ladies who do the shorthand may find it a bit booming otherwise. Thank you.
As you're going up, would it cross your mind, for example, are the conditions going to get worse? If so, what am I going to do? Is that the type of thought process that goes through your mind as you're going up?
Yeah, we constantly change decisions based on what we find around us at that given time, yeah.
And as you were going up, did that thought cross your mind?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Now, if we can turn now to the conditions you encountered when you got onto the lobby of the 18th floor, can you describe how the conditions in the lobby compare to those you encountered in the stairwell?
Exactly the same.
Now, in your statement, you say that Firefighter Foster hung on to you as you went round doing a left-hand wall search. Is that right?
Yeah, so when we entered the lobby area of the 18th floor, I had my left hand on the wall and Kate was behind me.
Now, your notes suggest that you found people in flats 153 and 154. Can you remember whether that's right or not? Are you sure that's right?
I'm not positive, no.
Okay. Could I ask Paul to draw up, it was the exhibit to Miss Foster's witness statement, and I can get you the reference, which is MET 000 15807. And if that could be oriented, thank you. I don't know whether you've seen this before, Mr. Lawson. This is Miss Foster's hand-drawn plan of the 18th floor. As you see in the bottom left-hand corner, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 marked. You followed a left-hand search going from flats 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Now, looking at that plan, which was the first flat in which you encountered occupants?
Number 2.
Number 2. And where was the next flat in which you encountered
Number
occupants?
3.
Thank you. Now, dealing first of all with flat 2, so that's flat 152. Who did you meet there?
The first that we got into was a young lady with 3 children.
And Had you banged on the door to attract her attention?
We had, yes.
Yeah. And how long did it take for her to open the door? Can you remember?
It was pretty quick. Again, I couldn't guess at the time, but it was quick.
And how far did she open the door? Was it inches or was it more abroad?
It was cracked initially until we said we were, and she opened the door to let us in.
Okay. So you said who you were. She let you in.
Yep.
How far into the flat did you go?
I went into her lounge and sat on her sofa.
Okay. Did Firefighter Foster accompany you within the flat?
She did, yes.
Was the flat entrance door closed after you came in?
It was, yes.
Who closed it?
I believe it was Kate. It opened the way out again.
So you came into the lounge and sat down.
Yes.
What did Firefighter Foster do? Can you remember?
She came in and joined me in the lounge.
Okay. And did she sit down or did she stay standing?
I can't recall that.
Okay. And how would you describe the conditions within the flat?
Like this, they were clear.
And who started the conversation, as it were? Did you or did the lady?
No, that would have been me.
And what did you say?
I introduced myself. The atmosphere was so clear. I moved my helmet and my smoke hood and my BA mask so I could speak clearly. Also thought it would help to calm the children rather than see me in a full get-up of a BA gear. Discussed what was going on outside, and that for the moment, the time being, they were safe in this flat.
Okay. You saw there were children in the flat.
I did.
What consideration did you give to, for example, prioritising the evacuation of the children?
In my mind there, a situation when we turned up, to take them outside that flat, I'm pretty certain would have died in my arms on the staircase.
What advice did you give to the lady?
I told her to remain calm for her children. I told her to make sure, I told her we had to search the rest of the floor. I told her that her room was obviously clear enough and unaffected enough for me to remove my BA mask, and that she'd be safe until we managed to get someone back to save her.
Yeah. And did you give her safety advice as to how to block doors of wet towels?
I told her to put a towel behind the door when I left.
Yeah. As you left, what did you say to her?
I've no idea.
Did you say you'd be back, for example?
I told her someone would come back for her, yes.
Yeah. Did you say you would come back or someone?
I said someone would come back for her.
And did you explain to her what you were doing next?
I explained that to search the rest of the floor, yes.
After you'd carried out the search of the other flats on the 18th floor, did you go back to flat 2?
I'm not sure now. I'm sure I knocked on the door again. I really honestly can't recall that.
Okay. Do you recall anything about going back to flat 2?
I remember once we'd been around the rest of the floor and made our way back to outside her front door, deliberating for a good few seconds as to the best course of action. And I still didn't believe that I was in a position to save everyone on that floor with just 2 firefighters.
When you say deliberated, were you talking with Firefighter Foster as what the options were?
Yes.
Doing the best to help us now, can you summarise what you said to her, or at least give us the gist of what you said?
Yes, so I mean, basically, when you're faced with 9 people and only 2 of you, me personally, I would find it difficult to ask a parent to pick 2 children for me to save. I think that's a decision no one could happily make. I knew I couldn't take 9 people down, it was just 2 of us. We tried to see, we waited a few seconds to see if there was an opportunity to maybe get them out in clearer smoke. Didn't happen. We prioritised radio messages, and I stood on the staircase and yelled for help.
And you considered that, and then you went back down, and we'll come back on to the search for the other flats, but just to sort of tail off this point now, what did you expect would happen to the occupants of flat 2 once you'd gone?
In all the time being in the fire service, I expect flats and buildings to behave a certain way. If I can stand in a room and remove my BA mask and converse with somebody, I expect that to be the conditions in the building. And I didn't foresee them changing that badly. We have no idea what's going on outside or how badly that fire spread was.
Okay. So notwithstanding the conditions you'd experienced, you'd seen the tower from the outside when you'd arrived, you'd experienced the conditions in the stairwell and the conditions you'd experienced in the lobby, your effective assumption was that the position wouldn't deteriorate. Is that a fair summary of your evidence?
The assumption I was making was based on the fact that people who'd been opening stairwell doors on the floors below had allowed smoke into the stairwell. And the 18th floor, at that height there, I really didn't think things would progress the way they did.
Okay. Final question in respect to the initial conversation you had with the woman within flat 2. Did you ask her to confirm what her flat number was?
I didn't know.
Okay. Apologies for throwing that out of sequence, but after you left flat 2, is it right that you went to flat 3?
Yes, that's right.
And again, did you bang on the door?
Yes.
And what did you say as you were banging on the door?
It says London Fire Brigade, open the door if you can hear us.
And, and the door was opened by a male occupant within?
That's correct, yes.
How far did he open that flat
the door was cracked head width.
Okay. And did you initiate the conversation?
I did.
And what did you say?
I asked him how many people were inside the flat. He responded with 5. I asked if anyone was healthy and well. He responded yes.
And did you ask him about what the smoke conditions were like in the flat?
No. Again, as I asked him was healthy and well. It didn't indicate to me otherwise.
Did you go inside flat 3?
No, the door wasn't open further than head width.
It's always difficult. Can you give us some idea of how far the door's open?
It'd be like opening a door to a salesman, maybe a foot perhaps.
Okay. And did you, Firefighter Foster in her evidence describes, from your position, the gentleman being backlit from the light coming from within the flat?
I could see down the corridor, and I could see whether another gentleman or an older child standing down towards the far end of the corridor.
Okay. And could you see, just for the avoidance, could you see any smoke within?
No.
Okay. Now, did you have the sense that the gentleman's that English was his first language?
I really couldn't remember that.
Okay.
The conversation was understood from my perspective, and I assumed from his too.
There's nothing to suggest you didn't feel he couldn't make himself clear?
No.
No. Did he say to you that he wanted to talk?
No.
No. Did he ask you for help?
No.
Did he say to you how many children he had within the flat?
No. The conversation pretty much went as, how many people in the house? He told me 5. I asked if he was well. He said yes. And I'm happy to stay in there. He said yes. I told him I had to go and search the rest of the floor, and if they were happy to shut the door behind me and put a towel down.
Did you say to him that the fire was on the other side of the building?
I really can't recall that.
Is it possible or likely?
It's possible, yeah.
Yes. Did he ask you how long it would take for you to get him out?
Not to my recollection, no.
Again, is it possible or likely that he asked you that question?
I mean, I suppose anything's possible, but I really don't remember that at all, no.
Given the information you've been provided that there were children within the flat, again, did you consider whether, in relation to that flat and flat 2, once you got that information, you could prioritise the evacuation of the children?
Yeah, absolutely, but again, my obviously with children in both flats, it only made my decision harder. Is you can't, between 2 people, decide who can and can't. So my plan was to get more firefighters to help me to get everyone out at the same time.
And did you assume that you would have sufficient time to complete the search of floor 18, get down, report to the bridgehead, and for fresh crews to be deployed up to rescue?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't have done it.
But you couldn't have done it on your own?
I wouldn't have done it.
Foster?
Yeah, I wouldn't have made the decision if I didn't think it'd be okay.
Okay. Now, if I could talk now about the rest of 18th floor. You went to flat 4 after flat 3.
Yes, yeah.
And was the door open or closed?
Door was open.
Open as in the
Physically
sense
open, yeah.
And what were the conditions like within that flat?
There was no light. It was a lot warmer than the other side of the building. Extremely dark and smoky. Smoke was almost at ground level.
And I think I'm right in saying you went next to flat 5, and again the front door was open and same conditions.
Yes.
After you finished your search of 4 and 5, did you close the doors after you, the flat entrance doors after you?
I couldn't remember. I would have pulled them behind me, yeah, but I can't be sure.
Okay. And the next flat you searched was flat 6, is that right?
We couldn't get into flat 6.
But I mean, you've got...
Yes, correct, yeah.
You came round to the entrance door of flat 6.
Yes.
And what did you experience once you got to the entrance door of flat 6?
Again, it was the same sort of thing. It was warmer on that side of the building. I banged and kicked the door. but I had no response.
Was there a marked increase in heat around flat 6 compared to, say, flats 1, 2 and 3?
No, I wouldn't say something that I noticed massively. Between 4 and 5 and 2 and 3.
Was there a marked difference in temperature between, on the one side, flat 6, and on the other side, flats 2 and 3, for example?
Yeah, flat 2 and 3 were much cooler and in clean air compared to the other side of the building, yes.
Did you open the door into flat 6?
No.
No. Could you tell from the surrounding ambient conditions whether there was a full-blown fire engaged in flat 6?
I couldn't tell, no.
And I think it's right that you didn't have a thermal imaging camera with you, is that right?
We didn't, no.
Would that have been useful, do you think, as a bit of kit to take with you?
I mean, absolutely. Everything we have is useful, but the reality is we only carry one of each on each appliance, and if you're sending out 3 crews from each appliance, then there's not enough to go around. You pick and choose which you get.
Before you left the 18th floor, we've discussed flat 2. Did you go back to flat 3?
No.
No. And you're sure of that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Now, it's right that you tried to radio down to the bridgehead that you'd found residents, including children. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
And were you able to get through?
No.
Is it right? Miss Foster in her notes said that you used both channels 6 and...
Channel 1 for command, channel 6 for BA, yes.
Is it that she used those channels to communicate on her radio, or was it that you both were using those channels to communicate back down to
No,
the
so
bridgehead?
we decided that Kate would use her radio, and I would just use my voice on the stairwell to try and alert other firefighters to our need for help.
Did you attract any attention from anyone?
None.
No. One point that's arisen is whether it would have been possible to have gone back to flats 2 and or 3 and asked to borrow their mobile phones to contact the bridgehead or someone else. How practical would that have been as a means of communication?
I mean, the reasons we didn't go back and open the door a second time was the conditions outside were so bad, it only makes the conditions inside that flat worse. So to go back, I think would have been the wrong choice. It'd also be quite impractical to assume they could phone down through control for all those phone calls and meet somebody on the bridgehead who had time to answer their mobile phone in the first place. So no.
So you've completed the search of the 18th floor.
Yep.
You've tried to get through to the bridgehead via various means. Can you remember how much air you had left? Had your ADSU started to sound by this stage?
I think possibly by the time we decided that we weren't getting help to run and get help, my issue started coming on the staircase, yes.
And was the amount of air that both you and Firefighter Foster had left, was that a factor in your consideration to leave the 18th floor and go back down to the bridgehead to debrief as
Yes.
what you'd found? Is it right that you considered trying to take down the occupants of flats 2 and 3 in a snake line?
Again, I thought I was in the best for the families, and which means a personal physical contact with each and every casualty if possible. With 2 of us, it wasn't possible. The conditions, in my eyes, would have meant that anyone who brought out their flat would have suffered greatly on the staircase. To have 9 people in a line behind you, I'd have no control over that, and I think that would have been a worse outcome than the decision I made.
Is that a thought process you had at the time?
Absolutely, yes.
And is that something you articulated out loud to Firefighter Foster, or was it something you internally considered?
No, we discussed everything at the 18th floor with Kate.
And she agreed that you couldn't
She did, yes.
employ a snake line. Now, as you went down the tower, can you describe the smoke conditions you encountered?
They were the same as when I entered.
Was the stairwell still illuminated? Can you remember?
Yeah, the lights were still on, but again, the illumination was very limited due to the thickness of the smoke.
There have been varying descriptions of the amount of noise in the stairwell. Some people have said it was noisy, some have described silence, and particularly more so once you're on the lobby areas. How much noise was there in the stairwell as you went down?
It was a really strange situation. Obviously, there was a lot of noise around you. It was hard to decipher any of it or make sense of any of it. It really was quite harrowing all the way down the staircase.
Did you come across any casualties being brought down the stairwell as you went down?
Yes, when we got down to, I mean, again, it's guessing because your sort of perception of floors was lost quite early on. To, I assume, about the 5th or 4th floor, the queue of firefighters went to get out with pre-alarms going and whistles going, like a queue back up the staircase. At this point here, casualties being brought down. There wasn't enough space for people to come in and to leave the building, so casualties were sort of passed down on a conveyor belt, if you like.
Can you remember what condition those casualties were in? For example, were some being brought down unassisted?
Well, I mean, not that I've seen. The ones that were coming down next to us were unconscious.
Did you see any casualties being brought down with the assistance of spare BA sets?
No.
Now, the next topic I'd like to discuss is your return to the bridgehead. Was the bridgehead on the 3rd floor at this time where
Yes,
you came
it
back
was.
down? And your end of wear was at 0227, which I think sounds about right.
That's about right, about 35 minutes.
Could you describe for us the situation you found at the bridgehead?
It was, I'd like to say, organised chaos. There was a lot of information, a lot of firefighters trying to relay information back to the bridgehead, a lot of information going in the other direction as well. A lot of people trying to get their point across. It was difficult.
Who did you speak to at the bridgehead?
I have no idea.
Can you remember the rank? Was it a white helmet?
It was a white helmet, yes.
Yeah. A man or a woman?
It was a male, and I thought station manager level.
Okay. And can you remember what, to the best you can now, what debrief you gave when you got to the bridgehead?
Yes, I'd told Kate to go out and get into some cool air. I then explained to the person, bridgehead, exactly where I'd been, to the 18th floor. I wasn't sure of the flat numbers. I drew a similar sort of map to this, and I drew next to the door of the first flat 4 and then 5 next to the flat above it.
And did you, on the plan, did you indicate how many adults, how many children were in flats 2 and 3 respectively?
I think I said 4 persons, 3 kids in the first. In flat 3, I wasn't aware of how many of each. I said 5 casualties.
Okay. And did you draw, just so we're clear, did you draw this? It seems as if you've done 2 drawings, one on the wall and one on a piece of paper. Is that right?
The one on the piece of paper was down by the front door to Mr. Batterby on the way out of the building. Yes.
And who did you give that to? Can you remember?
I get Charlie Batterby.
Charlie Batterby.
Yeah.
And did he say what he was going to do with it?
Again, obviously we left in the building to try and do the best we could, was get people back in as fast as we can in the right numbers. The plan I drew at the bridgehead was purely so they knew where to go and what to expect when they got there. Information I didn't have when me and Kate went, which would arm them better to deal with the situation. And on the way out, Charlie Batterby was someone else was taking the FSG calls by the front door. I then told him exactly what I told Bridgehead.
Okay. And you drew the station manager's attention to what you'd drawn on the wall to make sure the information got through, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And did he give the impression that he understood what you were communicating?
I think that, again, like I said before, information going back and forth, he acknowledged that I'd written it and drawn it. Whether how much information he actually withheld, I couldn't tell you.
And are you aware of what he did with the information you provided?
No.
Are you aware of what Charlie Batterby did with the information you provided?
No.
Okay. Paul, might I ask you to put up on the screen Met document 000-15819. Now, Ms. Lawson, do you remember seeing this writing on the wall on the 3rd floor?
I remember lots of writing on the walls. I didn't read any of it.
You didn't look at any of it?
On the way out, I didn't stand and read it. This would be my exit.
Okay. If, Paul, you could magnify the writing, 18, mother in child in flat, no flat number, 152 encircled. Do you remember, just for the avoidance of doubt, do you remember seeing that on the wall at any time?
No.
No. Did you see anyone writing any information on the wall?
No, I'd say when we got back to the bridgehead, there was comms officers, people writing stuff everywhere. My attention was purely to the OIC, and the information was passed to him.
Okay. And if we could pan out of that, can you see anything you've written on that wall?
No.
No. Could I ask Paul to bring up Met document 000-15815? Now, if we look at the middle column, Paul, you can expand 152 18th floor, which is got a line through it. Thank you. Mr. Lawson, can you make that out? Apologies, I think we're used to looking at these now.
So it says 4 casualties, 2 adults, 2 children.
Exactly, and a line seems being put through 152 18th floor, but 153 is not crossed out. First of all, have you seen this wall before, the writing on the wall before?
No.
You didn't. It was at the lobby entrance wall, if that's any assistance.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, when I came out entered the staircase and took off my BA mask, forwarded the information onto the crews at the bridgehead, I left the building and didn't re-enter.
Going back, you spoke to Charlie Batterby. Is it right that you told him where the flats were, but not the flat numbers? Is that right?
I said I couldn't recall the flat numbers. I explained it was the 18th floor. It was a second door on the left-hand search and a third door on the left-hand search.
Okay. Just finally, looking at these photos, Paul, if I could ask you to bring up photograph MET 00015816. Now, I don't know whether you remember seeing this green wall on the ground floor. No.
No.
Is it fair to assume you didn't absorb any of the information written there?
I don't recall a green wall, no.
No. Okay. The final topic I'd like to discuss with you, Ms. Lawson, is the subject of radio communications slightly further. Was there any way in which radio communications could have been improved on the night with the kit that you had there? When I say you, I mean the LFB.
I really don't know. I mean, it's not fantastic at the best of times. That sheer weight of traffic, I really don't know how I can cope with it. There's so many people who needed assistance, needed help, needed a product message sent through, and there's a limited amount of channels for those to receive it. So I don't know how it could have been improved at all, no.
Okay. When there are problems with the radio comms, what workarounds are there to ensure that you can get through to the bridgehead or entry control, or control generally? I mean, for the most part, even in a high-rise, where we sort of generally start off 2 floors below the fire floor, the stairwell is protected. We always have the availability of using your voice to shout down a corridor and they can relay downstairs. This just wasn't simply possible. What training do you get to enable you to work around any radio comms problems you have? We don't. So as obviously as an organisation, there are things in place that they want to see adhered to. As individuals working on the ground, that's not always possible. There's a lot of autonomy in what we do, and a lot of what is based on is experiences and skill sets that we have. Issues are reported later on, but for the most part, the workaround is just to carry on doing the best you can. One issue that's cropped up in some of the points that have been raised is whether it would have been practical. Where you had difficulties yourself when you called down from the 18th floor to see whether any passing firefighters. Would it have been practicable to have had firefighters positioned almost as point people on various landings to assist with the evacuation of residents and comms? In hindsight, there are many things that would have helped our situation. I think at the given time, anybody who was standing on a staircase doing nothing would have felt that they were doing exactly that, and people want to get involved and do the best they can. Standing around, unfortunately, doesn't make you feel like you're doing enough. Mr. Lawson, thank you very much. Those are the questions I've got for the moment. Sir, okay. Might I ask the usual?
Yes. Well, it sometimes happens that after further reflection, other questions come to light. So we're going to have a 5-minute break now. Please don't talk to anyone while you're out of the room, about your evidence, that is. And we'll resume at 5 to 3, and we'll know then whether Mr. Kinnear has any more questions for you. Okay. Is that right?
Yes,
right. Give the usher then, please. 5 to 3 then, please. Well, Mr. Kinnear.
Some brief supplemental, sir.
Yes. I think a few more questions, Mr. Lawson.
Ms. Lawson, thank you very much. Could I ask for you to turn to page 3 of your witness statement? It'll come up on the screen, which may be easier, Mr. Lawson.
Okay.
And it's really the final paragraph on page 3.
That's not mine.
And you say, you're describing now flat 3, and it's the second sentence. You say this: the next door flat, a gentleman answered the door. He opened the door to speak to me with the door on the latch. He told me he was inside with his family. He was safe, and he didn't want to talk to me, and then he shut the door again. I think in total he said there were 5 family members. I cannot remember what he looked like. Now, stopping there, given that there were children inside the flat, are you sure that this gentleman said he was safe?
Yeah, I mean, again, I wouldn't have walked away if someone was panicking or screaming for my help. If he'd opened the door fully and come towards me, I would have done my best to get him out at that point. The door wasn't opened more than, I say, a foot.
Could I press you slightly on this?
Yeah.
My question was, are you sure that he said he was safe?
Yeah, I'm pretty certain.
Okay. Are you saying it's likely or possible?
Likely. I wouldn't have walked away if he demonstrated otherwise.
Are you sure that he didn't want to talk?
I'm pretty sure I didn't end the conversation.
Thank you. Could I turn to one final point, and it's when you were debriefing Mr. Batterby. And did you say to Mr. Batterby, when you were doing that the reason why you couldn't complete the evacuation of the residents from the 2 flats on the 18th floor was absence of BA?
I made it abundantly clear at both the bridgehead and at Charlie Batterby that we needed more personnel on the 18th floor.
And did you mention the need for secondary sets, or did you not mention secondary
again,
sets for the reasons you gave earlier on?
Yeah, mainly for firefighters. I've never seen them used on members of the public before. But I made it abundantly clear that more firefighters were needed on the 18th floor immediately.
Okay. So I have no further questions, save to thank Mr. Lawson for his time this afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming to give your evidence, Mr. Lawson. You're free to go, and the usher will look after you. All right? Thank you.
So the
Yes.
next witness is Firefighter Fernandez. I don't know whether there needs to be arrangement of the furniture. There does.
For this witness or the one coming after this witness? For this witness? Right.
So
I'd better
I'm sorry,
rise.
could you rise again, please, and we'll sort out the furniture.
Let me know when you're ready.
Will do. Thank you, sir. So may I call Mr. Fernandez?
Yes, thank you.
Repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
Solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Fernandez. Yes, Mr. Kerr.
First of all, would you please confirm your name for the record?
Agnel Fernandes.
Mr. Fernandez, thank you very much for coming along today. On the lectern, you should have a blue folder, and if you open the blue folder behind the first tab, that should be your statement dated the 4th of December 2017.
Yes.
Yes. And if you turn over to the next tab, it should be your contemporaneous note.
Yes.
And if you turn over to the final tab, there ought to be 3 exhibits, which are Google Maps, which you exhibited to your statement. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Have you read those documents recently?
I have, yes.
And you confirm their contents are true?
Yes, a few errors in my statement, but
Well, would you like to point them out to us now so we get them right?
there are quite a few. Some are changing language from the police officer's language to what I would have said, which changes the context slightly.
Right.
So if it's okay, can we correct them if and when we come to them?
Well, we may not come to them.
We may not come to them. If you can identify what they are now, and then we can deal with them.
The first is the time of our first shout on the night of Grenfell.
What
Which-
page?
There were no calls until 00:55. That's the time of call for the incident. It's not the time of call we were mobilised from Chiswick.
Right. Yes, all right, thank you.
Okay, the other error is, it's on my statement, I think it's page 4. Just towards the bottom, it says maintaining contact with Firefighter Williams and I. There was a break in our contact as we passed the lifts. We weren't maintaining contact.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
And is that it?
From what I can remember right now, yes.
Good, thank you.
Well, that's fine, thank you very much.
If there are any other matters, do shout. Now, as I've said to others, if there are any time you want a break, please say so. That's not a problem. If any time I ask you a question that's unclear, say that's unclear, and I'll try and correct the lack of clarity. Now, Mr. Fernandez, the reason why you're here today is to help us, and we want to focus on the FSG call in relation to flat 175 on the 20th floor. So that's going to be the focus of my questioning. Now, before we get there, can we start with some basic questions about who you are and how long you've been in the fire service? First of all, is it right that you've been a firefighter since 2010?
That's correct, yes.
And that whilst usually based at Willesden, on the night of the fire you were based at Chiswick?
That's correct.
And that the call sign of the appliance you were riding that night was Golf 371?
That's correct.
And that on the night, firefighter Vincent Williams was your BA partner?
That's correct.
And in terms of timings, the LFB records indicate that you mobilised at 0126, you were mobile at 0130, and you were status 3 at 0139. Does that sound about right to you?
That sounds about right, yes.
And again, relying upon the LFB's records, in terms of your SDBA wear, They indicate that SDBA disconnect from the appliance was at 01:45, switched on at 01:51, and then you tallied out at the bridgehead at 0200 hours. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the first matter I'd like to discuss with you is entry to the tower and then your subsequent deployment. Now, is it right that as you went into the tower, Watch Manager De Silva was carrying out a briefing? Is that right?
No, not.
Was she carrying out a briefing at any time when you were in the tower?
Well, I understand your question to be, was she addressing a group and giving a briefing? No,
No.
that's not the situation.
Did you receive a briefing from Watch Manager De Silva at any stage in the evening?
Only as we checked into BA entry control and handed our tallies over, we were given our task.
Did you receive a briefing from any other officer before then?
There was, whilst in the BA queue, waiting to go through to the bridgehead, there was information coming back to us in brief and in passing. For example, we were told crews are being committed in pairs. One member of the crew is to take breaking in gear, the other is to take a branch and a length of 45mm hose. So again, we weren't addressed with a formal structured briefing, it was just as the situation developed.
In some of those pre-deployment briefings, if we can call them that for ease of reference, did anyone explain to you what the conditions were like further up the tower?
No.
How would you describe the state of organisation at the bridgehead at the point you were deployed?
It was busy. In a word, busy.
Did you sense that there was organisation there? There were arrangements for the efficient deployment of crew?
For what I now know to be the scale of the incident, I think it was the best that could have been arranged.
Now, in relation to your instructions, you say you heard Mr. Welsh and Mr. Eden be briefed to go to the 20th floor, is that right?
That's correct.
And did you overhear what the briefing was that they received?
No.
How did you know they were briefed to go to the 20th floor then?
They were committed immediately before myself and Firefighter Williams. Let's say they were in earshot, perhaps 2 foot away. I was paying attention to what Watch Manager De Silva, the information she was passing on to crews being committed, and I have a clear recollection of her looking at the BA crew immediately in front of us and saying 20th floor.
And you didn't hear anything else?
No.
And you and Mr. Williams were briefed in respect of flat 175, which is also on the 20th floor, that's right, isn't it?
That's correct.
Now, do you think, given there were 2 crews behind each other, both being deployed to the 20th floor, would it have been practicable to have formed a crew of 4 to go up so as to have more resources for evacuations?
Hypothetically, had there been more information, then yes. My assumption is that information wasn't available, so as much information as the information available was what was given to us.
Were you given any further specific detail in the briefing regarding the number of number of adults and children within the flat, or any vulnerability or disabilities? No. Paul, would you mind bringing up onto the screen Met document 000-15935? Now, this is a forward information board. Have you seen this particular board before?
I don't think I have, no.
Do you remember seeing it at the bridgehead?
I have a vague memory of a forward information board being there, and 2 BA entry control boards. I didn't. The information on the board, or my attention wasn't taken to the board, or no information was passed on from a board.
Could I just try my luck, see whether you're able to assist on one point there, Mr. Fernandez? You'll see at the far right-hand corner, roughly halfway down that board, 175, a tick, 175, 20th floor, and then what appears to be an asterisk. Mm-hmm. Can you help us with what that asterisk might mean?
No.
Can you remember whether Watch Manager De Silva used this board for the purposes of briefing you, or indeed the crew immediately before you?
Not to brief me, and nothing that, no, not that I'd seen.
At the point you were deployed, what was your view about the feasibility of getting to the 20th floor on the basis of SDBA?
I accepted and took on the task, going on the information that that we had gathered, approaching the building, which, yes, it would have been a feasible task.
And did Mr. Williams express any scepticism about the feasibility of being able to get up to the 20th floor with SDBA?
Not at that point, no. And our confidence in taking on the task would have been that we approached a building with 2 columns of fire on the outside. It was only 2 columns of fire on one side of the building. Thereafter, our time was inside the building. The delay time from arrival to being committed was inside the building in a BA queue with no information about how much or the fire had developed or how much conditions had deteriorated. So being tasked to go to the 20th floor in what my belief a normal high-rise incident to be would be completely feasible.
There was no discussion at all of EDBA and whether they'd be more appropriate?
Not at that stage, no.
You say not at that stage. Was there a later discussion with anyone at the bridgehead as to whether EDBA was more appropriate than SDBA?
Later, post the incident, yes. But at the time of the incident, the hours I was at the scene, I don't recall anything like that.
Can I now turn to your deployment to the 20th floor and the conditions you experienced on the stairwell? Now, you tallied out at 0201. Does that sound right to you?
Approximately. I have no recollection of exact timings for the incident, but that seems to fit well.
And I think your evidence is that after floor 5, visibility became difficult. Is that a fair summary of your evidence?
Yes, my floor numbers are a little bit of an assumption, but yes.
Can you remember whether the stairwell was illuminated as you went up? And if so, how far?
Initially, yes. Conditions began to fade after what I believe to be floor 5, so it was only 2 or 3 floors up from the bridgehead. They quite quickly got very, very poor. So there was illumination. I know there was bulkhead lighting, but the thickness and the colour of the smoke made that lighting useless.
Did you have your Barry set with you?
I did, yes.
Yeah. And how would you describe the adequacy of communications via the Barry set with bridgehead entry control?
I recall hearing some radio traffic, non-specific. I don't have a clear memory of what the conversations were, and I have a clear recollection of them fading out. So at one point, I've got nothing. I can't hear anything in my earpiece.
I'm sorry to press you on this. I'm mindful of what you said earlier about vagueness of floors, but can you remember about which floor the Barry set sort of faded out, as it were?
I would suggest before the 10th.
Did you have a handheld radio with you?
I did.
Yes. And did you try and use that at any stage on the ascent up to the 20th floor?
No, I had no reason to. I had the confidence of, again, noise, a conversation happening on that radio. But again, similar area in the building, perhaps the 10th, that would have fallen silence as well.
Did you have your mobile phone with you?
It may have been in my pocket, I can't be certain.
Did you have need to use it at all during the course of the night?
No.
Did you see anyone else using mobile phones within the tower as a means of communication? Now, you got up to the 20th floor.
Yes.
Could you describe for us the conditions that you met as you went into the lobby on the 20th floor?
The lobby and the higher parts of the building were of the same conditions. It was thick, black smoke, which lighting wouldn't penetrate or illuminate. It was just a clearer black you could see with the lights or with someone's torch. We went through the door into the lobby, stuck to the left-hand wall. You navigated by touch, and the only way to recognise flat numbers or door numbers was to be on your knees with your face as close to the door as it could be. The numbers, from my recollection, to the right-hand side of the letterboxes, approximately waist height or head height once you're on your knees. And when I say you face right up there's obviously a small distance for your BA mask and the visor on your helmet, and they would literally they were in contact with the door in order to see the flat numbers.
Would you agree with Firefighter Williams's description that conditions on the 20th floor were floor-to-ceiling smoke? It sounds as if you would.
Yes.
Could you hear the voices of Mr. Welsh or Mr. Eden once you're at the 20th floor lobby?
Yes, I could hear noise.
Could you hear what they were saying?
No.
And could you hear anything else once you'd got to the 20th floor?
We began. I was banging on any door I came across, on my knees throughout that time, and I know other crews would have been, because yes, I could hear bangs and thuds and shouts. I assume, for as best my memory serves, they may have been muffled shouts of fire brigade, anyone in, come to the door, etc., things like that.
Thank you. Could I ask you to turn to page 4 of your witness statement? It will come up on the screen for you, Mr. Fernandez. And really, it's 7 lines up from the bottom of that page. You say this, and describing what you're doing on the 20th floor. Firefighter Williams was ahead of me and identified flat 175. Firefighter Williams shouted through the letterbox and received a response. I think the door opened from inside. Firefighter Williams shouted casualty. I shouted to both firefighters Welsh and crew manager Eden that there is a casualty. I tried to use my radio to inform control that we'd identified a casualty, but it was at this point that I realised the radio was no longer working. I pressed the transmit button, however the radio didn't work. There were no communications being received on the radio. I cannot recall when this stopped working. Now, first, the impression is, from that part of your witness statement, that the casualty was inside flat 175. Is that your memory? Or couldn't you tell at the time?
I now know more detail as to that sequence of events, having spoken with Firefighter Williams.
Could you give us that detail? It'd be helpful.
I believe Firefighter Williams was ahead of me as he passed the lifts and came across 175. I now know that he's made entry to that flat. I don't know whether that was by the residents opening the door or him forcing the door or simply trying the door and finding it was unlocked.
But you didn't see him go in?
I did not see that, no. I now know that he spoke to the family, tried to get them to leave with him voluntarily. They were shocked and panicked. They didn't leave with him. It's at that point he's picked up the child that we carried down the stairs. He's got back to the door to 175, and that's when he shouted, or I've shouted and he's responded. Memory's vague over that, but that's where the rest of my statement comes together, with me making contact with him again at the doorway. He's told me our voice, our communication's all muffled through the breathing apparatus we wear. Hearing's very difficult. Not only can you hear your own breaths in BA, but the helmets, masks don't help with what you can hear. So he's got a message to me that I believe was something along the lines of, get the door, get the way out, we've got casualties here.
And if I could stop you, the door he was referring to there was the door between the lobby and the stairwell.
Would have been the
right?
lobby and the stairwells, I understood it, yes.
So at any point could you see into flat 175?
No.
Did you see, just for the avoidance of doubt, did you see the flat entrance door get opened by the male occupant?
No, I didn't.
Could you see the occupants within the flat?
No.
Could you hear them?
I'm quite certain there was noise. I wouldn't be able to isolate or identify that noise as someone from that flat.
Now, in your witness statement, I think this is you heard a woman crying for her baby, is that right?
As I made my way onto the stairwell, yes.
And can you remember for how long the woman was crying for her baby?
No, I couldn't put a time on that. I heard several screams.
And do I understand your evidence correctly that you didn't see any of the casualties until they were at the door between the 20th lobby and the stairwell? So you didn't see who they were?
No, I didn't.
On the 20th floor lobby, did Firefighter Williams pass to you or anyone else any information regarding the number of occupants within flat 175?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Nothing along the lines of X adults, Y children?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Given that you'd heard the woman cry, did you ask Firefighter Williams about the number of casualties within flat 175?
No, at that stage we began our descent with zero visibility, so I knew my position, having been pushed towards both verbally and finding the way to the door, the lobby door, onto the stairwell, that all I could do then was guide Vincent, and knowing he was carrying a child through touch, guide them both down the stairs safely.
Did you have any discussion, first of all, as to how Mr. Williams and the child were to be brought down?
There may have been a brief conversation or we may have been communicating as we moved, but I have no recollection of what that conversation would have been.
Sorry to press you on this. Did you have any discussion as to how the other occupants of flat 175 were to get down?
No, I was aware there were other occupants, again guided by the woman's screams for her baby, but I was also aware that there were 2 other firefighters on that floor.
And so you assumed that Mr. Welsh and Mr. Eden would help their evacuation?
Yes.
Okay. Given the smoke conditions on the 20th floor lobby and the stairwell, how practical would it have been to have shared your BA with any of the casualties who were still in the flat to take them down?
Absolutely impossible.
And why do you say that, just so that we can understand your reasoning?
The smoke was thick, black, acrid smoke, so strong that you could actually taste the smoke as your BA mask moved with sweat. You could taste all I could describe as burning rubber, burning tyres coming through in your sweat.
And so in response to the question, how practical would it have been to have brought down all 5 occupants, it's the same answer?
Yes.
Do you remember Firefighter Williams shouting to Mr. Eden and Mr. Welsh that the family still within flat 175 needed help?
No, my focus then was purely having I began descent downstairs backwards with my left hand around the banister, centre to the staircase, my right hand on the back of the child, staying in contact with Vincent and the child at the same time, so my hand would have been just above his wrist and on the child's back.
Is it right that you had no conversation with Mr. Eden and Mr. Welsh about getting the family down from flat 175?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Now, dealing with your descent down the tower, is it right that you heard other screams coming down the stairwell but couldn't help because you were helping with the priority evacuation, which was the child?
At varying points there were noises, possibly screams, thuds. Yes, there were noises.
May I ask, could you make out whether those sounds were firefighters banging on doors, or was it coming from residents attempting to attract attention?
I assume some of the thuds would have been firefighters banging on doors. They seemed quite pronounced thuds, so my assumption is that they're on the outside of a door and it's someone with some force, not a muffled, faint knocking for help.
And you got down to the bridgehead and you passed the child to Watch Manager O'Keefe, is that right?
No, that's not correct.
What happened?
I continued with the child down the stairs. I came to a bit of a bottleneck, 3 firefighters carrying 1 adult casualty, and I couldn't see a way around them. So I saw a firefighter then appear the other side of the obstruction. I now know that to be Vince, having moved around me, and I passed the child back to Vince, who then, I believe, passed the child on to Watch Manager O'Keefe.
Okay, so the child got to Watch Manager O'Keefe?
Yes.
Yes. And do you know what happened?
I believe I didn't see it being Watch Manager O'Keefe. It's what I've heard.
Okay, and were you relying upon what Mr. Williams had told you?
Yes.
Did you give any debrief at the bridgehead about your experiences going up to the 20th floor?
Yes, but I cannot recall what I would have said.
Can you remember to whom you gave a debrief?
I remember speaking both to Firefighter Alex de St Aubin, who was entry control officer at the time, and Firefighter Greg Lawson was there, but I have no recollection whatsoever of any detail into that conversation. I can't even distinguish whether I gave a debrief or I just received my tally and left.
Was Firefighter Williams, was he part of the debrief you gave, or did he debrief separately?
Must have been separately, I don't recall any.
Do you remember seeing Mr. Eden or Mr. Welsh at the bridgehead?
No.
At the point? No. Did you see any boards or walls been updated with the information you gave?
I have a memory of the bridgehead being quite congested. Yes, someone would have been leaning against the wall, appearing to write something, but I was in absolute heat exhaustion, physical exhaustion, and I have no memory of leaving the bridgehead or getting to a place of rest outside, so my memory from the bridgehead is non-existent.
Mr. Fernandez, thank you very much. Those are the questions I've got for you now. Sir, might I ask you to rise for 5 minutes
Yes.
to see if there are any supplemental matters?
Well, Mr. Fernandez, we're going to have a short break so that Mr. Kinnear can consider whether there are other things he needs to ask you. So please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room, and be ready to come back at 25 to 4. That's right. We'd like to go with the usher then, please. Right, 25 to 4 then, please.
No, sir. Some brief
Yes,
supplementals, please, sir.
Yes, thank you. I think there are a few more questions, Mr. Fernandes.
Mr. Fernandez, thank you very much for your help, and particularly for coming back. Just 3 more questions, so the end is sort of near. First of all, when you were assessing how to bring casualties down from the 20th floor, did you consider wrapping the casualties' faces, heads with damp towels or damp sheets to assist them get through the smoke?
It wasn't an option in terms of how our rescue developed, that was not an option.
Why do you say that?
Firefighter Williams had the casualty at the door and in his arms. His direction to me was to get the exit. So already aware of those conditions that we can't see anything. I couldn't see the exit myself. I remember turning, knowing it was a colleague, Firefighter Welch, by his stature, his stamp. I grabbed his attention and we crossed paths in that. He passed me on to the doorway and I passed him on to Firefighter Williams' direction. So there were no resources around. I hadn't entered the flat. I was very aware that the child that I was in contact with was exposed to this irrespirable atmosphere and time was of the essence.
Okay. Second point is, in his statement, Mr. Eden refers to a high-rise grab bag that is taken to incidents in high-rise fires. First of all, are you aware of this bag?
Yes, and as far as I'm aware, it was fully introduced post-Grenfell.
Given that it was brought in after Grenfell, does this grab bag set out a list of the items that are required to be taken in response to high-rise incidents?
I believe it does, yes.
And what type of items are identified on this list? Can you remember?
Firefighting equipment in terms of branches, hose, breaking-in gear, spanners, hand tools for attempting to operate riser outlets, things like that.
Okay. Is it as expansive as to include sort of secondary BA sets, or to consider whether they should be in use?
As far as I'm aware, no.
Okay.
So, well, the kit doesn't. To consider using, no.
Now, I suppose my final question flows on from my first one. Where you don't have spare BA sets, where you're encountering smoke conditions that you were on the 18th, 20th floors, how on earth are you meant to get people down safely? What protective measures can you employ to allow them to be brought down to the bridgehead safely?
I think generally every rescue we encounter is truly unique, so there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution or answer to your question. If many other high-rise incidents that I've attended, stairwells are safe passage. So we find a way, whether it be extract someone to the opposite side of the building and perhaps a balcony as an interim measure, or a protected stairwell ultimately should be exactly that, protected and safe passage for not only ourselves but for residents of the building.
Mr. Fernandez, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Those are all the questions I have for you, so thank you very much for attending the inquiry today.
Thank you.
Yes, well, thank you very much indeed. It's been really helpful to hear your evidence, and we're grateful to you for coming along.
Thanks.
And now you're free to go. Thank you very much. Right to go to the usher. Thank you.
So,
Yes, Mr. Cleary.
the 7th and final witness for today is crew manager Martin Hoare.
Thank you.
And I don't think there needs to be a furniture rearrangement. No, there doesn't.
Does there need to be a documentary rearrangement?
I think that's all been done. Yes.
Right. Yes, good. Thank you.
Sincerely and truly
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the
and
truth.
nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hall. Yes, Mr.
First of all, will you please confirm your name for the record?
It's Martin Hoare.
Good afternoon, Mr. Moore. Thank you very much for coming along to give evidence today. First of all, hopefully on the lectern there is a blue file which contains, behind the first tab, your witness statement dated the 11th of November of last year. Is that right?
That's correct.
And behind that should be your contemporaneous note. Is that right?
That's correct.
And behind that, 3 exhibits to your police statement. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And have you read all those documents recently?
I haven't seen the plans at the end, but I've seen the rest.
And you confirm the contents of those documents are true?
Correct, yeah.
And you're content for those documents to stand as your evidence at this inquiry?
I am, yes.
Mr. Hoare, as we've discussed with other witnesses, if at any time you need a break, please say so. That's no problem. Secondly, if any of my questions are unclear, say so, and I'll try and correct them.
Okay.
Now, just to give you a steer on what we'll be considering today, my questions will focus on the discovery of the male casualty on or about the 10th floor.
Okay.
Now, before we get to that, just establish some groundwork. First of all, at the time of the fire, is it right that you were a temporary crew manager stationed at West Hampstead?
That's correct.
And how long have you been a firefighter?
For 16 years now.
And throughout that time you've been with the LFB, is that right?
That's correct.
And the call sign of the appliance you were riding on the night was Alpha 412?
Yep.
And firefighter Tanner was your BA partner, is that right?
He was, yep.
Now, as to timings, the LFB's documents indicate that you mobilised at 0133, i.e. your status 6, and you elected to travel, I think.
Yep.
Yep. And does that sound right?
That sounds about right, yep.
You were mobile at 0135?
Yep.
And as to arrival time, there is no time, but the SDBA disconnect from your appliance was 0148.
Okay.
So can you remember how many minutes before 0148 you arrived, before you disconnected the SDBA?
Almost immediately we got straight off and grabbed assets.
Okay. Now, is it right in terms of the timing of the SDBA, you switched them on at 0253 and you tallied out at the bridgehead at 0255. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, that's about right, yeah.
Okay. First topic I'd like to discuss with you is your entry and deployment, and really the process from the lobby to the bridgehead in particular.
Okay.
When you were waiting in the lobby area, did you receive any briefing regarding the building itself or the conditions within the building?
No.
Did you hear any anecdotal stories coming back as people came out?
Not whilst in the lobby, no.
No. As firefighters came out, did you get any information from them as to what they'd encountered?
No, not that I remember, no.
Okay. Did you see a watch manager at the lobby door writing FSG details down on the wall?
I didn't notice that at the time, no.
Paul, could I ask you to put up on the screen Met quadruple 05774? Just to double check, Mr. Orr, this is a photograph of the writing at the lobby.
Yep.
Do you remember seeing this at all?
I saw that, yes, but not on the way in.
Okay. Did you register any of the information? No. Now, turning to the bridgehead, is it right that the bridgehead was at the 3rd floor at this stage?
Yes.
And do you recall a board where the deployments were logged? First of all, can we turn to the forward information board, and if Paul could bring up document Met 0001879. Do you remember seeing that?
I don't remember seeing the board, no.
No. Do you remember seeing it being used for the purposes of briefing crews at the bridgehead before deployment?
I don't really remember that, no. There was some writing on the wall of the 3rd floor, but...
And flowing from that, if I ask Paul to bring up photograph Met 0001584. Is that what you remember?
No, I remember there was a plan of the floor layout which was that we looked at before we went up. Whether that was on the wall or the board, I can't remember.
When you say we looked at, did a watch manager or a more senior officer just take you through?
Yeah, watch manager O'Keefe and watch manager De Silva just told us to look at it and try to familiarise ourselves with the floor.
Mr. Hoare, I know it's always tempting when, after I've finished a question, but mainly for the transcriber, if you wait for me to finish, and then she can put everything down, then she can record your answer. Can we now turn to the instructions you received at the bridgehead? And your original instructions were to go up to the 10th floor, flat 74, to recover a diabetic man. Is that right?
That's correct.
And who gave you those instructions? Can you remember?
I think it was Watchman de Silva.
And was that all the information you were given?
Yes.
Yeah. At the time, did you think that was sufficient for your purposes, or would you have liked more?
No, that was good enough.
Now, as I understand it, your instructions were then changed to go to the 12th floor. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And what revised instructions were you given, first of all?
That there was a firefighter unaccounted for on the 12th floor, last thing on the 12th floor.
Okay. And who gave you those amended instructions?
I think it was Watchman de Silva.
Okay. And was it a particular urgency because it was an action in respect of a missing firefighter?
Yes, yeah. It was just forget the first brief and go to the 12th to find a firefighter.
And was it because it was a missing firefighter you go in a crew of 4, is that right? Or was it just for...
No, not necessarily.
Okay. Can you remember why? Because your statement gives the impression you went to respond to this revised instruction in a crew of 4. Is
It was
that
two
right?
crews of 2.
2 crews of 2.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, apologies, this may be a question directed to the obvious, but what's the reason for keeping the radio airways clear until the firefighters recovered?
I don't know that was happening.
Okay. Did you know the other members of the 2-man crew who went with you? Now, if I can ask you questions about your deployment to the 12th floor, and particularly the conditions and situation that you encountered on the stairwell. Now, you tallied out, as we've discussed, at 02:55. As you left the bridgehead, can you describe smoke conditions as you went up to the 7th floor?
I think it was, we first went up to the 12th, do you mean?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I think it was fine up to about floor 5 or 6, and then it just started deteriorating.
Can you remember whether the stairwell is illuminated by a light?
I don't remember, but it must have been, otherwise we wouldn't have been able to see anything.
Can you remember how many casualties passed by coming down the tower as you were going up?
I don't remember any coming down when we was going up. There was some when we were coming down that came past us.
And can you remember any firefighters coming down as you were going up?
No, we don't remember any of that, no. I'm sure there were, but...
Now, you got to the 12th floor. Can you give us an idea, first of all, how the conditions on the stairwell compared to the conditions you experienced on the lobby of floor 12?
Lobby was smoke-filled. It just got gradually worse as we got the higher we went.
And I think it was whilst you were on floor 12 that you received confirmation that Firefighter Hill had been found, is that
That's
right?
correct.
And you returned down the tower, is that right?
Well, I radioed through to say that we were going to continue with our original brief, which was go to flat 74.
And so you left the 12th floor and went down.
Yeah.
Did you get to the 10th floor?
Yes.
And how would you describe the conditions between the stairwell and the lobby of floor 10?
The stairwell was thick with smoke, but the actual lobby itself, once we opened the door, was boiling hot.
And I think in your statement at page 15 you described it as being like an oven. Is that a fair description? And was the heat such that you effectively forced the ground?
Straight to the floor, yeah.
And how high off the floor was the smoke? Can you remember? Was it
Probably
floor to ceiling, or was there some...
No, there was a gap. When you was down low, you could probably see, it might have been 2 foot or something from the floor.
Can you help us to give us a picture of the conditions you encountered? You entered onto the 10th floor lobby. What did you do next? And you were down on the ground because of the heat.
Yeah, straight to the floor, yeah. And then Matt crawled in to the actual lobby itself to have a look around. And I was about to follow him when he found a casualty.
And what did he say to you?
He just said, I've got a casualty here.
And that you brought the man from the lobby to
We pulled him out onto the staircase, yeah.
And were you able to test for signs of life?
I did try. I took my glove off, but I couldn't feel a pulse or anything, but it was, you know. I wasn't surprised. He could have had a pulse. We wasn't sure.
Okay. And what training do you have in detecting signs of life?
That's it, really. Check the pulse.
And
Yeah.
that's it?
Pretty much.
Okay. And is it right that you radioed the bridgehead to say that you'd found a casualty on the 10th floor lobby? Is that right?
Yes.
And did you get any response from them?
I did, yeah, on my handheld. I just let them know we found a casualty and we were unable to continue to flat 74. And I can't remember what I got back, but I'm pretty sure they confirmed they got the message.
And if I can just sort of divert for a second, in terms of radio comms, as you, on your initial ascent up the tower, did you experience any issues with the radio comms?
Yes, I had a Barry set on, but it didn't work. Channel 6 was just crackling. There was no... That's when I switched it to... I think I might have switched my Barry set to Channel 1, but I certainly had my radio on.
Okay. And did you experience any problems with the use of your handheld
Not
radio
when I
on
went
the
to
way
use
up?
it. No, sorry, not when I went to use it. It was working.
Going back to the man, you brought him to the 10th floor stairwell, and then you took him down, is that right?
We tried to, yeah.
And what happened next as you took him down?
Well, we was on our way down. There were people coming past, live casualties walking with firefighters, which we had to move out of the way to let them pass. And we just continued trying to get our casualty down.
You mentioned the casualties on the way down. Can you estimate how many you encountered?
I'm not sure, 2 or 3. There may have been more, but that's all I actually remember.
Can you give us an idea as to the condition in which the casualties were as they were coming down the
Well, they were walking with the firefighters, so, you know, it was priority for those to get out, really.
Did you see whether any of them were getting down with the benefit of BA sets or not, or was
No,
it
I didn't see that,
effectively
no.
unassisted?
No, didn't see that.
Now, is it right that by the, again, just recapping, by the 7th floor you were running out of air, is that right?
Yeah, we was running out of air, yeah.
And what did you decide to do with the casualty that you were bringing down the stairs?
Well, we tried to switch round because I had the shoulders and head end, which we tried to turn round, and then we both decided both our whistles were going. There was also the warning, the alarm was going off to tell us that we was being evacuated. I didn't hear it going off.
And if you can help us with that, the alarm that sounds that the building is going to be evacuated, that's a separate and distinct alarm, is it?
That's the ADSU that they can press that sets off your alarm to let you know it's being evacuated, yeah.
And that makes a distinctive noise, does it, separate to the...
Yeah, than the actual ADSU, yeah.
Yeah. And does anything light up on your
Yeah,
place?
it lights up as well, yeah.
Okay, and what lights up? What's illuminated?
I just think there's some, I can't even remember, I think they're either green lights or red lights that sort of flash.
And your training is, once that's activated, that you're to get out?
Well, you're supposed to, yeah, but I didn't hear it going off because we were just breathing so heavy.
And so, is it right that you left the casualty at the stairwell
We had
on the
to,
7th
yeah.
floor?
Yeah.
Now, you returned to the bridgehead. Did you report to anyone once you got to the bridgehead?
Yes.
To whom did you report?
I don't know, but by this time the bridgehead was on the ground floor.
Was it a female or a male officer?
I think it was a male officer, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
White helmet or not?
No.
And can you, doing the best you can you recall precisely or give us the gist of the words you gave in your debrief?
Yeah, we said, we confirmed again with them that we couldn't make it to flat 74, and we had a casualty which we found on the 10th, that we got down to which we believed was the 7th floor, and we had to leave him there just because we run out of air and to send somebody up to get him.
And just, did you give them a precise location
Yes.
as to where he was?
We drew it on the map exactly where he was.
And did Firefighter Tanner do that with you or
Yes.
separately? It was
Well,
with you?
I think it was separately as well, but we both pretty much said the same thing.
Okay. Now, in terms of the identification of that casualty, you identify him at page 25 of your statement as Mo Tuku, is that right?
Well, that's, yeah, I saw him on the news and I was pretty sure that was him, yeah.
Okay. Now, were you aware that Mr. Tuku was carried out by firefighters at 0229?
No.
No. Could I ask Paul to put up the CCTV schedule, and it's Met reference 000-16072_0038, and it's box 784. Now, on the basis of that document, Mr. Hoare, it looks as Mr. Tuku was brought out at 0229. Given that you didn't tally out until 2:55,
Yeah.
it's unlikely that you...
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I said I couldn't be 100% certain, but his face flashed up on the screen on the news, and I was sure that was him.
But that was the sole basis of identification, what
Yes.
flashed up on the telly?
Yeah.
Okay. But if that's it, right, you're...
Well, that's going to be more right than me, I would imagine.
Can I just deal with a few other sort of ancillary matters arising out of your witness statement? At page 16 of your witness statement, you state that an element of the rationale for not attending the mail in flat 74 was that it wasn't an FSG call. Now, would you like to go back to page 16 of your witness statement?
No, that was more the police officer who was asking me didn't really understand why we wouldn't have proceeded to flat 74. So I've gone over the FSG extensively because she kept asking me. I said it wasn't an FSG call, but it wouldn't have really made any difference. We would have still had to make a call when we found the casualty anyway.
Okay. And in relation to the staircase, can you remember to what extent the stairs are obstructed by firefighting equipment and other media?
There was lots of personal possessions, clothing, bags, just general stuff people would have dropped on the way down. There was hose and other equipment.
You mention at page 4 of your witness statement that the normal procedure is for a watch manager and his crew to be allocated to an individual FSG call. So for multiple FSGs, would you expect a watch manager and a crew to be allocated to each and every one of those?
Well, in normal circumstances, yes.
And implicit within that is your view that these were not normal circumstances, is that right?
Absolutely not, no. But at no time was we wasn't told that it was an FSG call.
Final question for now, Mr. Hoare. You say at page 19 of your witness statement, and it's the third substantive paragraph, that you're not qualified to declare life as extinct. What training do you receive on assessing whether a casualty is alive or not, and what actions to take if life is still present?
Well, we're not medically trained to say that someone's life is extinct, so we have to presume that everyone is alive until someone more qualified lets us know they're not. So you have to treat everyone as if you need to get them out.
Mr. Hoare, thank you very much for your time. Sir, might I ask for the usual 5 minutes, just to see if there's...
Yes, we normally have a short break so
Okay.
that Mr. Kinnear can decide whether more questions need to be asked. So we'll stop now until 4:05. Please don't talk to anybody about your evidence while you're out of the room.
Okay.
And we'll, as I say, we'll resume at 5:05.
Thank you.
Would you like to go to the usher then, please? Right, 4:05, please.
No, sir.
Yes, Mr. Kinnear.
Sir, just one supplemental question with your permission.
Right, thank you. Well, let's ask Mr. Hoare to come back in, shall we? I think just one, actually, Mr. Hoare, but we'll see when Mr. Kinnear gets going. Yes, Mr. Kinnear.
Mr. Hoare, thank you very much. Just one question. Before you left the male casualty on the 7th floor, were you able to detect any signs of life at all?
No, we did try again, but no, we didn't detect anything at all.
Mr. Hoare, I have no further questions for you. May I just say thank you very much for attending today. It's been valuable.
No problem.
Certainly. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Hoare. It's very helpful to have your evidence. Now you are finished and you're free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The usher will look after you. Yes, Mr. Kinnear.
So that concludes today's business, save for one matter. So I was going to ask whether we could start at 9:30 tomorrow morning.
You've been speaking to Mr. Millett.
There have been communications. I can let you into that much. We have 4 witnesses in the morning. There have been a number of questions raised in relation to them. The hope and expectation is that we can deal with the first 4 witnesses hopefully by noon tomorrow, and I know the CP's representatives will assist in that aim, and that will allow, I'm told, sufficient time for examination of Mr. Wolfenden to be done and completed by 4:30 tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I know it's not popular anywhere for us to start early, but we do have to try and keep up with the timetable for the firefighter witnesses, because disruption to our timetable disrupts their working timetable, which is an important matter for us to take into account.
It is.
So, with that assurance, I will say 9:30 tomorrow.
I'm grateful, sir. Thank you.
Good. 9:30 tomorrow, please. Thank you.